Thanks so much for painting with me today. So I'm going to go through this, and I don't know how often I'll stop, but y'all feel free to pause it and back up as much as you need to throughout the video. So that'll be really good for that purpose. I'm going to walk you through the steps that are on your instructions that were printed. And then if there's anything you want to go back and add later, change colors, make slightly different colors, you can always do that too. Okay, so the first thing that we're going to do, number one, it's talking about how we're going to blend colors. And that is important to know that the colors have to stay wet to blend. Dry colors don't mix together, but the wet colors, the wet on wet, they blend really nicely together. And if there's a color combination that doesn't so much blend well, I'll let you know so we know which colors to look out for. Number two, using your biggest brush as a mixing tool, you're going to use white and honey mustard. It says 2 scoops of white and 1 of honey mustard, but you can use whichever you want. That's going to lighten it up a good bit, but of course you can add more honey mustard if you like the darker color. So we're going to do that, and that's the sand color, and we're going to mix this area, or we're going to paint this area right here on the bottom of the shell, that sand color. So honey mustard and white, and it's going to look about like this. Okay, so color similar to that. You can add more white if you want it lighter, or you can add more of the honey mustard if you want it darker. Now, as you're painting, try to keep your brush strokes kind of going back and forth in a horizontal direction like this. And then if you get inside the pencil lines, this is where some of the water breaks, and of course that's the shell. If you get in the pencil lines, that's perfectly fine because we're going to paint over that later. So going back and forth, horizontal brush strokes, and grabbing a little bit more paint. So right about here. Okay, and then also if you want to wrap your color around the edges, you can do that, or we can always try to do that during a break, but I usually try to just take whatever color is closest to the edge and then just wrap it around. Okay, horizontal brush strokes, go around the edge a little bit, and like I said, if you get in the pencil lines, that's perfectly fine. Okay. And then here's where, if you would want to pause until I get through with this, or until y'all get through this step, you certainly can. All right, so the next step is to mix the sky colors. And step 3 mentions to go ahead and mix your piles of color. And you can mix it actually on the box if you want to, or if you want to get a paper plate or something, wherever you want to mix on is fine. But the turquoise, it's blue, green, and white. And again, you can do any ratios. If you want it blue or turquoise, add more blue, or the pretty green turquoise, you can add more green. But we are going to do the sky, so it's a touch more blue. Blue, green, and white, that's going to give you turquoise. And then we're also going to go ahead and mix the pink, which is pink and white. And I think the instructions say red, but I actually gave y'all a deep pink, which is prettier in this one anyway. So pink and white, and that's going to give you a lighter pink sky. And then the yellow, so the yellow it's bright on its own, but yellow is very transparent sometimes. So that's why we add the white to it to make it a little bit more opaque, and also just to kind of brighten it a little bit more. Now, if you look at the picture of the sky, you can see that the sky goes from like blue to a yellowish to a pink, maybe a little bit of whites in there. And that's really pretty for the sky. And if you mix blue and pink a little bit together, you'll get kind of those purple tones, which is really beautiful. And if you mix pink and yellow, you'll get kind of that coral orange color, which is really pretty. The only 2 colors that we don't necessarily want to mix are blue and yellow, because that might turn green. But if that does happen, that's perfectly fine, because the best thing about acrylic paint is that it dries very quickly, and then we can just paint right back over it. So no problem if we get a little bit of green in there somewhere. But we're going to try to fade our sky from blue to pink down to yellow, and we can work a couple of the colors into each other. So number 1, we do want the colors to stay wet so that they blend well. And then also the palm frond lines that I drew, feel free to paint right over those. Don't feel like you have to paint a little bit here, skip over, paint a little bit there, because you will still be able to see the pencil lines through your paint. Or if for some reason that you can't, then I'll show you how to redraw them again. But when we paint, we're going to start pulling our brush strokes horizontal like we did the sand, and we're going to go from blue to pink to yellow all the way down to the horizon line where this water line in the sun is. We can also paint over the sun a little bit too. To me, it's easier just to paint right over than having to work your way around, but you do what you feel is more comfortable. Okay, so we're gonna mix our turquoises, blue, green, and white, and then we'll have our pink and white, and we'll go down from yellow. And the other thing with blending is because we want our colors to stay wet, you do have to work a little bit quickly because the acrylic dries so fast. So I'm gonna do this very quick. Y'all watch this and then you can go back. You can pause it or go back and then do it again. Just because it's harder to kind of stop within each step since we do want the paint to be wet. So again, turquoise, or you can even use light blue, blue and white, pinkish to yellowish, okay? And I'm mixing those colors first. And again, that's just step 3 if you want to go back and reread what I'm doing again. So blue, a little bit of blue, a little bit of green, a little bit of white, and this is our sky color. Okay, a little bit more white if you like the real light colors. And I'm going to take this color and brush all the way from one side to the other. And I'm going to gradually add a little bit of the white into it just to make it a little bit lighter. You can see here, I put straight white on the canvas, but because the blue was still wet, it just turned a lighter blue. And I don't know if you can see it on the screen, but you can still see my pencil lines through there. So no worries about covering those up. But if you did, then I can show you easily how to redraw them too. So blue and white at this point. Okay, blue and white. And I haven't put any more blue on my brush. I've just been dipping in white. I'm going to do that one more time. Dip my brush in white, but because the blue is still wet, it's still turned kind of light blue. And I love pink, so I've saved a good bit of room for my pink because we're going to have a lot of blue in the water too. So, all right, last of the white. See, I've worked it down. I try not to measure. I mean, this is probably about halfway, but it doesn't necessarily have to go halfway or so. Now for the pink, and just watch how I'm working the pink right into the blue. And when that happens, that might turn a little bit of the purple. See, pink on the white canvas by itself is just pink. But when you work it into the blue, see how you can get kind of those purple tones in there, and it's so pretty. Like that. And you can do more, or you can do less. And also another way I like to blend, I use my fingers and go back and forth. And to me, that makes a softer blend. And just remember, we want to do blended colors, not a stripe of blue, a stripe of pink. So we're blending these colors into each other. Okay, a little bit more of the pink. And you can see it's kind of turning purple. Okay, now when pink and yellow touch, it's going to turn like a corally orange color, which is really pretty. But I do still have some of the blue in my brush because I didn't rinse it very well. So I do want to wipe off my brush so that the blue and the yellow don't mix and turn green. So I'm rinsing off my brush. And I'm doing my yellow mixture, which is yellow and a little bit of white just to help lighten it up some. Okay. Now my pink has already dried so fast. So I'm really trying to work it in there. You can see a little bit of the orange now. And if you want it more orange than that, then you can certainly add more pink in here, just like that. Okay, so I'm going to pause this for a minute too and let y'all get caught up. And just various shades of yellow and pink, pulling my brush horizontal back and forth. I've covered my sun, and that's okay because we're going to paint over it. And I'm going to pause that for 1 sec. Let's see. All right, so we've done the sky and the sand, and now we're on step 5. Okay, step 5 is using your brush and your pink mixture. We're going to paint the pink sections of our ocean. So on the picture, you can see that we've got blue on the outside, pink on the inside, yellow, and then pink and blue again. And then the step after that, step 6, we're going to be painting the pink that's overlapping the sand right here. So we can go ahead and mix enough pink to do both of these steps at one time. So I'll show you about where the pink is on the ocean. Again, you can do more or less, and then the same with the pink on the sand. If you love pink, feel free to do more. If you don't like as much pink, then you don't have to do as much of it. But we can do both steps at the same time since they're the same brush stroke, same color. So pink, again, it's the pink and the white mixed together. And I'm gonna do the sand first. Okay, so we've got pink, like a pink shadow on both sides of the canvas. Now, what I'm gonna do is put my brush on the edge of the canvas and I'm gonna pull towards the inside, but I'm loosening my grip so it kind of feathers the paint. So I have a lot of pressure right here on the edge of my canvas, and then I'm loosening the pressure, loosening my grip as I come toward closer to the shell. You see how this feathers out and it doesn't just abruptly stop. So we're just in feather. So again, tighter pressure, looser pressure, just pull your brush from the outside in and just kind of let it feather. So it's basically just kind of sitting on top of the sand. Okay, so that's one side. And now I'm going to do the exact same to the other side. Okay, starting my brush on the edge of the canvas with more pressure and then just kind of loosening my grip so it's feathery as it comes out. And you can see that there's different lengths, like some are longer and some are shorter, and that's fine. It's just a shadow, you know, so it doesn't have to be exact. And I love pink, so I'm adding probably a little more than what's on the original, but I think that's really pretty. Okay, and then when we do the sand, sorry, that was the sand. When we do the water, that's going to be almost the same thing. We're going to have blue outside and then pink and then yellow, pink, and then blue. So we can go ahead and kind of break up the area where the pink is. So if you see the sun right here, again, maybe hard to see on the screen, but you can probably see in your canvas. And if not, then we'll redraw that area. What I'm going to do is take my brush lightly down just a little bit. And you see how they're not straight lines. They kind of come out at an angle. And that's going to give me my area of where I'm going to paint the pink. And I'm still going to do that same horizontal brush stroke that we've actually done sand and sky and the shadow on here. And I'm going to pull my brush horizontal back and forth for the water. But these are going to be shorter brush strokes. So still horizontal, but shorter. So I'm going to start all the way at the back. You can start up here too. That part really doesn't matter. I just tend to start in the back. But I'm going to pull my brush back and forth just a little bit, not too much, and kind of widen as I go out. Kind of following that line that we drew earlier, so that later when we come back, this is going to be blue part of the ocean, this will be the yellow, this will be pink again, and the blue. Okay, so horizontal brush strokes, kind of shorter in the back, maybe a little bit longer as they come towards the front. Okay, doesn't have to be exact at all, just kind of mimicking the sky colors. Same thing on the other side, it's smaller, maybe a little bit wider. Okay, I've gotten right here on my shell, and that's okay. We're gonna paint over it too. Okay, and then that's about all for the pink on the ocean. Now, this didn't leave us much yellow, but the good thing about acrylic is that it can sit on top of it. So we can still fill a pretty good bit with yellow if we want to later. After we put the blue on, we can even add more paint or more pink or more yellow. So there's plenty of opportunities to add more colors throughout. Okay, we can go ahead and rinse our brush. Get the pink off. And let's check on the next step. We should be, say 6. Okay, so step number 7, we're going to do the same thing that we just did, but we're going to use the turquoise for the water this time. And so we're going to start our brush back here with the water. And if it overlaps the pink and turns a little bit purple, I think that's really pretty. You know, kind of pick up some of these tones in here. Or if you don't want it to mix, just let it dry a few more minutes. And that way it'll go from blue to pink and no purple in between. But I love the purple. I think it's so pretty. And I think, yeah, there's actually a little bit of turquoise over here too. So we can do the same thing. We can do blue in the water, tiny bit of blue, tiny bit of blue, all in the same step since it's the same color. Now I'm still using a medium brush. Y'all can feel free to swap back and forth. You know, this is a bigger area. So if you want to use your larger brush back here, that's fine. Or if you want to swap to smaller down here, that's perfectly fine too. Use whichever brush is more comfortable for you, but I'm still on my medium brush for right now. All right, turquoise, blue, green, and white. And again, you can darken it with more blue, or you can make it more green, kind of emerald coast color with more of the green, or you can lighten it with white, whichever your preference is. And I'm going to start back here, again, right on our horizon line, pulling my brush strokes horizontal, letting it overlap the pink slightly. You can see it's turning a little bit kind of purple under there. Trying to keep these feathery edges like that so we don't have any abrupt lines. And I'm going to bring it all the way down to about here. And this is where our water, you know, where it laps up on the sand and breaks a little bit. That's that area later. If you get any color inside there, that's perfectly fine. I said we'll paint over it. And here, I'm going to actually put a little bit of color in there. Okay. Other side. My horizon line. Whoops, made it a little higher. Okay, feathering this over the pink. So that just means I'm putting just real light pressure right here where it's touching the pink. All the way on the edge. It may cover a little bit of the shell. That's okay. Remember, this part doesn't have to be perfect either. We can always lay some more color on top of it later. Covered up the tip of my shell. Bring in a little bit of blue down. If you want to pause and catch up here, you can, but I'm going to just go over to the other steps. This is the same thing. It's just adding a little bit of blue here on the edges. So just like we did earlier, we laid our brush down and then just kind of loosened our grip. I'm going to do the same thing here and here, and I'm not doing too much just because I want the pink to really show off. So it's just a tiny bit of the blue there. Okay. All right, so we can catch up there if y'all want to pause if you want to, and we'll come back and look at the next step after that. I always do this. I try to straighten up my line and it gets bigger and bigger and bigger. All right, there we go. Okay. I'm going to pause too so I can rinse and read over the next steps. All right, so the next step is going to be the yellow, and it's the yellow for the sun, that little half circle up here, and then the yellow reflection here. And both of those are smaller areas, so I am going to use my smaller brush at that point, but you can certainly use a medium brush, just flip it on its side to get a thinner brush stroke. And then the yellow, like I said, it's white and yellow mixed together. Because yellow is naturally a little bit transparent, it may look a little thin, and you can go over it in a second coat, which will be perfectly fine. Just let the first coat dry first, because as we've already learned, wet paint on wet paint just picks it right back up. So if the yellow is not, I guess, strong enough, or it's not dark enough, then just let it dry and we'll put a second coat right over it. And so we're going to do yellow and white for the sun, yellow and white for the reflection here, still keeping with the horizontal brush strokes, just like that. And if you have any blue that's wet anywhere and it picks up the yellow, it may turn a pinch of green, which in the ocean, that'd be kind of natural anyway, so that's okay. But if you want to just let it dry a couple more minutes, that's fine too. Here should be dry, and it shouldn't, or if it does, it'll just kind of orange like the sunset, but just wanted to watch out for the blue in case any of that touched the sun. All right, so yellow and white and small brush, and I'm going to paint the sun and the sun's reflection. Okay, so yellow. And I paint pretty thick, so it covered up enough the first time. But like I said, if you want to go back and do a second coat, you certainly can. Okay, now yellow for the water reflection. Horizontal brush strokes. So pretty. Okay. There we go. All right, and we can pause and take another little break if you want to after that part, and rinse out our brushes again before we go to the palm leaves. If there's anything that you want to do at this point, you can, you know, if you wanted to go over like a lighter blue over here, which I'm going to show you that later, but like for little waves and stuff like that. But if you want to make, you know, darker areas or darker pink, something like that, you can. Or if you need to touch up anything in the sky, you can see here with the yellow and blue touch and it turned kind of green. I think that's really pretty. I'm just going to leave it. We'll go with it. Maybe add some more green out here on purpose later. Just love that bright color. All right. So the next step is yellow, white. Okay, we're down to number 10. So we're going to use the black paint for the palm trees. Now, if you look on the picture, you can see that the palm trees are mostly the dark green, but we want to do the black first because it's the shadow underneath the palm leaves. We don't want to put our pretty green on there and all of a sudden have to cover them up with black. So the black may look a little bit harsh at first. Actually, I think it's really pretty because it reminds me of how the sunset makes all the really dark shadows. But we're going to do the black first, and then when that dries, then we're going to put the vibrant greens and the teal turquoise leaves on there. So small brush and black. And if you can see your pencil lines, you can use that as a guide for how to pull your brush strokes down. But if you've covered up your brush strokes, it's still very easy as long as you just see the direction, and that's what I'm going to show you on here because I know you can't even see it up here on the screen. But the branches, okay, so they fall down, kind of swooped over like this. They're not straight. So they kind of start in this corner. It doesn't have to start in the exact corner. It can start down here, up here, over here, and there's 3 different leaves. Of course, you can add more if you want to. You can add some down low, or you can add some over on the other side if you want to as well. But you want to keep in mind that they fall and kind of swoop down. Okay, so that's going to be the first thing that I'm going to do. And I'm not going to start in the dead corner because that bugs me. So I'm dropping down a little bit and I'm going to pull down. Okay, there's 1. Okay, I'm going to do another one starting from the top, and I'm going to pull this one down a little bit farther over the ocean. And actually, I don't know. Yeah, the original one, they went 2 over the ocean. And then the other one, I'm going to try to stop a little bit higher in the sky. So maybe about here. Okay. The one thing you don't want about leaves or, you know, really anything natural is that they don't have a specific pattern. They're not going to fall exactly the same width apart from each other. You know, this one's going to be a little bit shorter and these are going to be a little bit longer. So just kind of mix them up a little bit. Now, the leaves underneath it are the same concept. They kind of swoop down, they fall down. So they don't stick, like our leaves are not going to stick straight up like that. And they're not going to stick straight down. They kind of swoop down. And to me, I feel like it's more in your wrist to kind of get your wrist to swoop. And I'll show you what I'm talking about. Okay, so I start at the top of the branch and I pull down and out. And I say this to myself too. Pull down and out, down and out, down and out, like that. And you see how my wrist is just kind of giving it that little oomph, that little push down so that they're not poking straight out. And we don't want it to be thick and full. That's what we're going to use our green for. Remember, this is just kind of a delicate shadow behind. So they do look a little bit sparse. And that's okay because we're going to fill them up with some pretty green later. This is just kind of helping us get them going in the right direction, give them a little bit of shadow underneath. But just pay attention to my wrist. They're coming out and then down, out and then down. Okay. The other one, and go out and kind of fall down, out and fall down. You're pushing your brush towards the end of the branch. Whoops, I said I was going to stop in the sky, but I didn't, and here we are over the water again. That's okay. All right, so we're going to let all this black dry really well before we put the green on top of it later. I think we've got another step in the shell, but I'll go ahead and y'all can pause this again. If you want to go ahead and rinse your black out, I'll know we'll have to do that. I think. Yes. Okay, so if you want to go ahead and pause, rinse your black out. We do need black and white for the shadow of the shell, but we don't need this much black, or at least I completely saturated my brush. And if you did the same, you may want to rinse out so we don't have so much brush on there, or so much black on there. So go ahead and rinse that out. And we are down to step 11. Okay, so this This step actually has us using 2 brushes, and you can certainly do that if you want to. I'll show you that, and I'll show you a different way as well. But basically what we're doing is the shell, okay, the shell is white, but it's not plain stark white, okay? It does have a dark white, which is the shadow underneath it. We have to have a gray or a dark white underneath it so that the clean white and the other colors sit on top of it. So what I'm going to do is grab my medium brush, and I'm going to paint my shell white, or at least just the bottom of it for now. If you want to paint the whole thing, you can, but I'm going to just focus on the bottom. And I still had some pink in my brush. So you can see some pink in there. That wasn't intentional. But you see where the curve is on the bottom? That's where the shadow is going to be cast here. And then the shadow is also on these, the spirals. They probably have a name. I'm sorry, I don't know what the name of them are. But the rounded part of the spirals up here. And then also on the inside where you can see the inside of the shell, that's going to have a darker shadow too. So you can paint the whole thing if you want to, but as long as the white is wet, we're about to put the black. Now, when we put the black on here, we want to use a tiny, I'm talking like teeny tiny, if you can see that, teeny tiny little pin drop, because the black's going to go a very long way. If it gets too dark, that's okay. We're going to paint white over it. So if you end up with a really dark gray shell, no biggie, we'll paint white over it. But what I'm going to do is lay just a tiny pinch of the black down, like where the shadow would be on the bottom of the shell. And I'm going to do the same where it would be on the spirals, like here on the edges of the shells. And then a little bit on the inside, like where the shadow of the inside of the shell is. Okay, now you can use your medium brush again, or you can use your finger. I prefer my finger just because it's a little bit smoother, especially when you're doing rounded areas. And I'm just smudging out that line so it's a shadow and not a harsh outline. So I'm just working that gray right into the white, because remember it was still wet. And the same here, I'm working the gray right into the white. It's like that. And that is dark, but remember we're going to put white over it. Okay, so this is our shadow area of the shell, and you can get a little bit darker over here. I don't guess I got enough dark. And blend that back in a tiny bit. And then we will paint over this white and then some of the brighter colors, the pinks and the yellows on top of this when this black fully dries. So if it looks a little bit dark, that's perfectly fine for now. Okay. Now, we do want all of this to dry for a few minutes, so that way none of the black mixes into the green and none of the black mixes into the colors on the shell. So let's go ahead and let that dry for a few minutes, and then we'll come back with clean brushes and clean water. All right, so our black should be about dry. If there's a couple of spots in there, that's okay. It'll mix into the dark green, just turn it darker, which is pretty for the palm trees. And then this should be about dry. So the area that we haven't painted yet is right here. And this is where the water kind of breaks from the water into the sand. So I'm going to put a light coat of white here, just when I go back and put the white coat on the shell. So we'll do those two at the same time. And then we'll go ahead and do the green first and get those done. So the green palm leaves, you can mix green and a little bit of white together just to lighten it up. And that just depends on the shade of green that you want. The ones on the original, I see they're green. I believe she's using green and white. But if you wanted more of the green, like the brighter green, you can actually add a little bit of yellow in there too. So green and yellow and white makes a pretty bright green. And then the green and white by itself makes more of the pastel, like turquoise green. So just kind of play around with shades of green. And this time we're going to make our leaves a little bit fuller. The original has kind of dainty leaves, and those are really pretty. But if you want to add a couple more leaves on there just to make them a little bit thicker and fuller, you can certainly do that as well. You just pull down more brush strokes. So I've got a green and a white, and I like the yellow in there, so I added just a pinch of yellow into mine. And we're going to go right over where we had the black, not necessarily trying to cover up the black. We do want it to show for shadow, but I'm going to follow close to the same lines. So again, I'm starting at the top, I'm pulling down, and Actually, the quicker you go with this, the better it's going to come out. That way you're not overthinking exactly where to put the leaves. So here you can see the green on top of the black. You can still see the black pretty dominant through. I love that. I love the contrast, but if you want to thicken it up and, you know, add a little bit more green so the black isn't as dominant, that's really easy to do. So totally your preference on that. Okay, I'm going to do the same to each of those, pulling down from the top, doing each of the leaves. And feel free to stop and pause this as you need to. Try to work a little quicker so y'all can kind of see what's to come and what it's going to look like. Here you can see I accidentally smudged in some black and it turned a darker green, but it's pretty. We can go with it. Okay, and then the other one, let's see, green, a little bit of yellow, a little bit of white. Same thing, starting from the top, pulling down, and then pulling out the individual leaves. Just the same way I did the black, not necessarily covering every one because we still want the black to show for a shadow underneath. Okay. And you can always go back and add more if you want to anywhere. Bring some in from the other side or kind of sneak another one in there, however you want to do those. That green is just such a pretty color. And we were talking about earlier, you know, if there's things that you want to add that's not in the picture, like I love green in the ocean. So I'm going to add a pinch of that green out here, kind of like the little sandbar area, just to break apart the blue. Because I love that turquoisey green. And again, that's just kind of a personal preference. That's not on the original, but just trying to find some more areas you could work in. Green, or you could do that with white if you wanted to lighten up an area. You could put white or a real light blue, and that even covers up some of the I think with the purple mixed in there earlier, which was pretty too. But there's just so many pretty ocean watercolors we can add in there. You can kind of just play with those as you like. Okay. Now I'm going to paint the white part of the break of the wave and the white part of, actually just kidding. Let's go back. Let's do just the break of the wave because I'm going to show you a different technique too. So on the original painting, there's just a little bit of white that kind of separates the water from the sand. And you can do that by pulling your brush stroke with white, just horizontal to keep it kind of smooth like we've done the whole time. But I love adding a little bit of texture. So I've actually got white on my finger. And I'm going to kind of dab like a little bit of maybe some waves that are coming up a little bit. So they're kind of breaking a little bit up higher. And then I'm using my brush. Nope, that's my finger. Using my finger to pull some of the water where it breaks on the sand in that direction. So you can do it like this horizontally, just like we've had earlier. Or you can break the waves a little bit, kind of bubbly, and give it some texture. That, and you can do that on one side and then on the other side, however you want to do that, whether it's pulling your finger or your brush horizontal to keep it smooth, or kind of dabbing and give it some bubbly texture. I'm going to cover up my green because the green was so pretty. Okay, and I'm going to do a little bit of both over here, maybe a little bit of water going back, and then maybe a little bit of bubbles. I just love that texture. Okay. And then bring in a little bit of water on top of the sand, just where it's kind of gently lapping on top. And you can either let it be kind of thin, like the water would naturally be thin, or if you want to go back and do a second coat of white and make it heavier, that's totally your preference. However you want to do that's fine. There's no right or wrong with that. Now, the other thing I'm going to do is put more white on the shell. I don't want to cover up the gray completely. We still want it there as a shadow, but we don't necessarily want all that much. Unless you do, then you can leave some of that. But I'm going to put white on the shell, and then I'm going to smudge in just tiny, tiny bits of color. This one has a little bit of yellow and a little bit of a little bit of yellow in the shell and a little bit of blue in the shell. So I'm going to work in both of those. But to get the yellow and the blue in the shell, the white has to be wet. So I'm going to paint the whole thing white quickly, and then I'm going to work in some yellow and some blue. And remember, when you paint it, follow the direction of the shell. So we're not going to paint the shell this way. We're going to kind of curve our brush and curve our brush up the little spirals. So again, I'm using medium brush, and I'm going to use white. And I'm repainting my shell and just leaving a little bit of the gray showing, not as much gray as I had earlier. So you can see a little bit, just not as much. Okay, and I'm painting it white so that it stays wet. So that way I can work the blues and the yellows, or you can work some pink in there, whatever colors you want to put in your shell. Okay, here's where I'm curving my brush to keep the curvature of the shell. So I'm curving. Oops, got real curvy out there. Okay, there's the top spiral of the shell. Okay, and then as far as colors, we still want it to be dominantly white, I think, unless you want it a different color. But I'm going to keep mine kind of close to the original. So I'm going to do dominantly white, but I'm going to put a little bit of yellow kind of on the inside of the shell. And I just added a tiny bit, and I'm going to use my finger to smudge just to keep it real soft. Like that. So just a little bit of the yellow inside the shell. And then I think there's a little bit of blue on the bottom of the shell in the original. So a little bit of blue. Again, I'm adding just a tiny bit of blue with my finger, but I'm going to smudge it back in a rounded direction so it works its way in there real soft. And if you like kind of that dark contrast, you can leave it very blue, or you can just put white back on top of it again and smudge it back out to where it's softer. So you can really kind of play around with those colors and any colors that you want. Again, I love the pink, so I might try to work a little bit of the pink into the curvature of the shell, like the little spiral part. I think that'd be pretty. I'm just doing that with my finger, just putting real subtle. Again, we don't want, we don't want them to look like stripes or anything. Just little hints of color. This kind of looks like a strawberry ice cream now. A little ice cream cone. There we go. Very pretty. Okay, so while you're catching up on those, I'm going to double check and make sure that we have everything on there. Okay, we've got the little birds in the sky. Let's see, birds in the sky, yes. And a little bit of an outline on the shell if we want to do that. Okay, so I love the painting just like this because I feel that there's enough contrast between the shell and the water and the sand with our gray. But if you don't feel like there's enough contrast and you'd like to add a little bit of an outline on the shell, I think that's number 14. We can do that, and I'll show you how to do that, but you're going to want to do very, very minimal brush strokes just because we don't have much black on our canvas to kind of offset the black that's on here. So small brush stroke and black. And again, this is just personal preference. If you feel like your shell stands out enough, you certainly don't have to do this part. If you do, just very lightly, very whimsical, don't overthink it too much. We don't want a heavy line. And that's why I say the faster, the better, because when you paint quickly, instead of overthinking it, going slowly, you end up pressing your brush down a little bit too hard. But if you go quick, it's just a little bit there, a little bit there. And it helps to make the noise too. All right, so a little bit like that, maybe a little bit around the curve, a little bit around the bottom of the shell, maybe the top where it curves. And then if you want to kind of accentuate the spirals on top, you can do that. If you feel like that's too dark, all we have to do is let it dry and you can put some more white back over it. So totally your preference with that part, but I'm going to leave that just how it is. I'm happy with the black that's up here on the trees. If you want to add little birds, you can do, just kind of that little V shape with the little wings, kind of almost like a M. So V, pull the wings out, or however you want to do those. And I have to have things in odd numbers. So I'm going to add a third like that and step back and look at it if you haven't already to see if there's anything else you want to add as far as color. One thing that I do want to add to mine is right here. I can still see the pencil line between the horizon line and the sun. And that's just because the yellow is kind of transparent. So I'm just going to go back with one more coat of yellow just to make sure that that's covered up right there. Or I may do, actually, let's see. Yeah, maybe like an orangey color. I feel like that might color it a little bit better. You can do that in any color, or you may not even have to do it if you got your yellow thick enough the first time. But I'm using a little bit of yellow, a little bit of pink, just to make kind of an orangey tone. I'm just going to brush that right over my pencil line. It's not super visible, but I can see it a little bit. Okay. Well, I hope y'all enjoyed that. Let me know how this goes, and feel free to text me if you want to after this, and send me your pictures. I'd love to see them. I think my phone number is in the email that we've been going back and forth with, but if not, it's 256-338-6333, and I can't wait to see pictures. Thanks so much.